Welcome to Tim's Top 10 Tips for Teens. After seeing this, you should have some good ideas for how to make your team projects better. But first, let me give you an overview of this whole idea of teamwork. It's something different than we're used to. So generally, when we think about teamwork, we think about the IPO model. Input, processes, output. This is a standard model in the group dynamics literature, and it says that teams are different from individuals. Teamwork is something different. We have to take the inputs, what comes into the team first, and that's the people, the task, and the context. That's what comes in ahead of time, the backdrop for the teamwork. And then there's the stuff that happens as a team. That's the middle. That's team process. That's conflict. That's setting norms and roles. That's how leadership works. This is different than individual work. And then there's the outcomes. And the outcomes really can be divided into two different things. The task outcomes, that's as instructors generally what we want. And then the person outcomes. Now, I hope that you get how passionate I am about this in this short video, because as instructors, we often think about the task work. But I want to stress this right now, 2022, teamwork is the number one skill, not a top skill, the number one skill that employers are looking for from high school and college graduates. And as instructors, it's our responsibility to help them with that. And if we lead a team project that goes really bad, then we have set our students up for failure with teamwork processes in the future. So it's our job to run these team projects well. So here we go. Tim's top 10 tips for teams. Number one is about team assignment. We often think about team projects, and I'm not thinking about pair shares or little group projects in the class. A group, just people working together. A team is something more. That's something long-term. That's something that requires interaction and dependence on one another. So when we're thinking about team projects, we need to assign teams deliberately, not using self-selected teams. And I can't stress this enough. The research shows over and over and over again that self-selected teams are bad. Don't let your students do that. Instead, think about ways to create diverse teams. And I'm not talking about racial diversity. There's so many facets of diversity, including background diversity, major diversity, where they came from diversity, so many different things. We want to encourage this diverse workforce in the future, and we want to do that by getting people to realize they have these different skill sets. So when assigning teams, it should be deliberate, it should be open, it should be transparent, it can be random as long as it's open and transparent, but it should find a way to spread students out so they get to work with people with different backgrounds and different skill sets. So number one, don't use self-selected teams. Instead, very clearly come up with a deliberate method or some specifically random method to do it. Number two, and by the way, these tips are not just from me. I should give credit where credit is due. This comes from my book with Lauren Vicker, and we have seen again and again instructors come up with a team project, which means they just take an individual project and assign it to a group of people. That's not a team project. Team projects are different. Team projects require people to break it up, but they will also require people to bring it back together. So for example, writing a paper is not a team project. Writing a paper is an individual effort that can be broken up to one person doing this and one person doing this and one person doing the other thing, and then just shoved back together. It doesn't usually work that well. So when we think about a team project, it needs to be something that they can break up into subcomponents and that requires them to interact, to solve problems, to create decisions, to have somebody who has to assign different people to different things. And a team project should be more difficult than an individual project. Yes, it should, because you're spreading those efforts out across people. So if it's the same amount of work as an individual project, the students are getting the same outcome. The difficulty requires it to be more complex. It's not just an individual task. It's something that makes the team work together. Now, number 3, you as the instructor need to provide a context and a supporting environment. The context is important. If the context is fighting teamwork, then the team project won't be nearly so successful. So number 1, as an instructor, you have to be supportive of the team processes, supportive of the teamwork, and you have to reward the team efforts, not just the individual efforts. You have to reward both, and you have to have a system that encourages teamwork. And that means the room you're in and the people that they're working with and the resources you're giving them and all the things they need to create that team effort needs to support team efforts, not individual efforts. So thinking about a room, we've got great new active learning spaces at St. John Fisher. Team processes, team projects are active learning processes. They are definitely a subset of that. And so look for those active learning rooms. Look for rooms where you can move people around, where the team really is able to interact in the classroom. Number 4, once your teams get together, you've set the context, you've created the task, you've assigned people deliberately or transparently for teams, you've done those inputs. Now we're talking about processes. Processes, number 1, to get your teams going on the right step is to create supportive team performance norms. And these norms, there's on this slide some examples of them. Vegas rules, for example, everything that's said here stays here. But the norms should be created by the team, not dictated by the instructor, created by the team. People have more buy-in to things they create themselves. That's Kurt Lewin, fundamental Kurt Lewin, group dynamics founding person. Number 2, the team performance norms should talk not only about how they're going to get the task done, certainly task expectations should be on there, but also how they're going to act towards one another, their social behaviors, their ways of acting. So create supportive team performance norms that make teamwork better. Number 5, teamwork is an essential skill. We can't argue that. So team leadership is something that we also need to work to develop. Our job as instructors is developmental. So leadership development is part of our role if we're going to run a team project. So team leadership should at times rotate. Different people should take the lead, especially on a team project where it's a team of equals. Team leadership needs to be inclusive, needs to have somebody who understands how to empower others, reach out and get everybody involved, get input from every single person. And number 4, team leadership has to be goal directed. Certainly you have to have the social part, the inclusive, the empowering part, but you have to have people focusing on that goal, moving forward, getting things done. So a team leader really needs to be organized and ready to move forward. Number 6 is motivational strategies. So many things I could talk about here, but I'm going to just talk about 2. Number 1, as instructors, and I am often at fault for this, we tend to focus on how people can do better, constructive criticism, constructive feedback. But what we also need to work on, and as exemplars for our students, to praise good work when we see it. Positive, supportive environment. And number two is find ways to develop team camaraderie in your classroom. Get people working together. Give little icebreakers here and there. So there's some in the book, there's others online, so that people really can focus on how to work together well. These kinds of procedures to develop team camaraderie are great to build cohesion and make the members think about how their actions affect other people. Number 7, communication. Now, some of you out there know me and know that I'm a big skier, an avid skier, and sometimes I'll be sitting on the lift chatting with people. And once I was chatting with somebody who knew I had written a book on this, and now I have 4, and they asked, what's the single most important thing that somebody should do to improve teamwork? And I said, it's easy. This is a no-brainer. Improve communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That is essential. In fact, over communicate. So in your classroom, as the instructor, you need to, again, be the role model, be the exemplar here. So create a climate in your classroom where all people are encouraged to speak up. And that requires, again, this ongoing positive feedback from their peers, from you, and also ongoing developmental feedback. And you as the instructor should set up the processes to give them the opportunity to give ongoing, regular, and I'm not talking about just once during the year, but ongoing, regular positive and developmental feedback. We shouldn't fear feedback. Feedback is what makes us better. So ongoing developmental and positive feedback can help to create that environment. And this is simply by once a week having your teams give each other feedback. And if you require it, if you make it something that they know is coming, that they are going to have to give for each member, one thing the person did well that week and one place they could do better, then feedback becomes the norm and people get used to, they've gotten that positive regard, they've gotten that supportive communication, they've gotten that supportive feedback, and they know what they can do to improve. And if at the end of the semester you're giving one evaluation to say, how did your team members do? You as an instructor have not done your job because they've never had a chance to develop, improve, and change based on your feedback and their feedback. Ongoing opportunities for positive feedback and something they can do better. Number 8, any team task should create opportunities for problem solving and decision making. This should be part of the task. Your teams need to be able to learn to solve problems as part of the task and learn to make decisions together. And I'm not talking about unanimous consensus decisions where everybody agrees. In fact, you'll see in number 9, conflict is part of what's going to happen. People are going to disagree and they have to figure out the procedures, the structured procedures that can help them to get through that and make a decision that they can all back. So they need to learn to make these decisions. They need to learn to solve the problems, and your task should encourage that. Number 9, and my friend Seth Silver, I'm giving a quote from him. Conflict is inevitable. Anger is a choice. Conflict is part of working together. But the goal here with teams is to get the conflict focused on the task. What is it we need to do? And we may disagree on those things that we need to do, but that's okay. In fact, Hegel, philosophy of Hegel, a dialectic, there's a lot of people who say that the conflict in teams, when it's focused on the task, can make teamwork better, can make teams greater than the sum of the individuals in there, the sum of the parts. For those who have a background in psychology, this is a gestalt view of teamwork. There's synergy, something happens, and that's because of the dialectic, the conflict that is created around the task, where people have different backgrounds, different ideas, different diverse ways of looking at something, and then get focused on this task and find ways to work together, to pull it together, to make it even better. Now, here's the problem, is when the conflict focuses on the personal. And there's a lot of good information out there that I've written with my colleague Lauren about moving conflict from the person conflict to the task conflict. Person conflict is bad. That makes teams fall apart. When it attacks or targets a person based on their individuality, their individual characteristics, rather than we disagree about how to get this done or how to make this decision. So moving the conflict, good leadership, good instructor skills from the person to the task is always the goal in teamwork. And we're almost done. Tim's top 10 tip number 10 is you need to measure your social and task outputs. I want to remind you that teamwork is the number one skill that employers are asking for. American Associations of Colleges and Universities last year's survey showed this. Employers, it's the number one skill. If your students are having a bad team experience, you might be setting them up for failure in the future. It's your job to develop their teamwork skills, to help them with teamwork. And you need to reward teamwork and individual work. So peer feedback is absolutely necessary. Lauren and I have a great video out there about how to develop peer feedback. It is actually designed for you to show right in your class. You can take it and use it, show it in your class. You don't even have to lecture about it. 20 minutes, I don't even think it's 20 minutes, but 20 minutes time, you got a great opportunity to help them learn how to give peer feedback. And then you need to reward the teamwork, because that's what you see, how they're working together, but you also need to reward individual efforts and figure out how to commingle those rewards. If you only reward teamwork, of course, you get a lot of individual social loafing and demotivation. If you only reward individual work, then that one person is going to take over the project to get the group grade. You need to mix rewards for individuals and teams. And that's Tim's top 10 tips for improving teamwork.